Novak Djokovic won a crucial battle this morning after a judge overturned his visa cancellation in a court hearing. However, the war isn't over and the Serb's participation in the 2022 Australian Open still is not set in stone. During a long drawn-out court hearing riddled with technological difficulties, Federal Court Circuit Judge Anthony Kelly ordered the immediate release of the world number one from immigration detention, overturning the government's decision to cancel his visa because he's unvaccinated against COVID. Djokovic had been in detention in a Melbourne hotel since last week after being held at Melbourne Airport on Thursday morning. He arrived in Melbourne with a medical exemption from Tennis Australia to play in the Australian Open, but after a series of overnight interviews with authorities at the airport, he was told his visa was cancelled. Djokovic then pursued legal action soon after. As I mentioned earlier, this court hearing was pretty lengthy, so I'm just going to jump to Judge Kelly's main reasoning for revoking the visa cancellation. Basically, Novak wasn't given enough time to even respond to his visa getting cancelled in the first place. Kelly said the visa cancellation was invalid because Novak was told at 5:20 a.m. last Thursday morning that he had until 8:30 a.m. to formally respond to the cancellation threat notice under Section 116 of the Migrant Act. The border force apparently asked for Djokovic's statements at 6:14 a.m. They made the decision to cancel his visa at 7:42 a.m. If the border force acted how they should have and gave Novak until 8:30 to respond, the Serb would have been able to consult his legal counsel and would have been able to properly challenge the visa cancellation, which basically puts the feds at fault for malpractice. The court hearing also revealed the transcript between Djokovic and a Department of Home Affairs officer who ultimately rushed the 20-time slam champ to explain why his visa shouldn't be cancelled. So the interview begins at 12:21 a.m. where Djokovic confirms that he's unvaccinated and tested positive twice for COVID in June of 2020 and December 16, 2021, with the documents to confirm it. So then there's conflict because Novak gets his exemption, which is through the state government by Tennis Australia's panels. However, the officer says that Novak needs to show information from the federal government that supports the exemption because the feds are the end-all be-all. Novak said that he didn't get any information from the federal government, and the interview was then suspended for 3 hours, and upon its resumption, Djokovic is issued a notice of intention to consider the cancellation of his visa. Novak reasonably contests this sudden notice, telling the officer that he's provided all the documents Tennis Australia and the Victorian government asked of him. Nole then says, "So you're giving me legally 20 minutes to try to provide additional information that I don't have at 4 o'clock in the morning? I mean, you're kind of putting me in a very awkward position where at 4 in the morning I can't call the director of Tennis Australia, I can't engage with anybody from the Victorian state government through Tennis Australia. You just put me in a very uncomfortable position. I don't know what else I can tell you. I mean, everything I was asked to do is here, and I wouldn't be here sitting in front of you if I wasn't complying to all the rules and regulations set by your government. So to me, it is just a little bit shocking that you're going to give me the notice to cancel my visa based on what? If you can, we can wait for 8 in the morning and then I can call Tennis Australia and then we can try and figure this out. But right now, they're all sleepy. I don't know what else I can do at this moment. So I know legally you're following, but it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, I've done everything I possibly can. Right now, I can call my agent. You just told me not to use my phone, so I'm not communicating with anybody. No one knows what's going on." The officer continues to give Novak vague answers, which he calls him out for. The interviewer then tells Djokovic that under an act from 2015, previous COVID-19 infection isn't considered just grounds for an exemption. He tries to get Novak to sign a document related to the visa cancellation, but Djokovic refuses and repeatedly asks to use his phone so that he can contact Tennis Australia to get things sorted. The officer lets him have access to his phone around 4:30 a.m., but then an hour later asks the Joker to again state why he should be given the visa. Nole did this, but then was notified at 7:38 a.m. that his visa was cancelled. Djokovic's lawyer Nicholas Wood essentially argued that his client was denied procedural fairness through this ordeal, as Novak wasn't given enough time to contact his lawyers and was unjustly pressured by border force officials, which I completely agree with. Wood also asserted that Novak had done everything he thought he was supposed to in order for him to enter Australia. Judge Kelly vehemently agreed, even asking himself, what more could Novak have done? won. Kelly made his final verdict to overturn the cancellation 5 p.m. Monday local Aussie time, ordering that Home Affairs pay Novak's legal costs and take all necessary steps to release the applicant immediately from detention. However, government lawyers immediately warned that Immigration Minister Alex Hawke could re-detain Djokovic through his personal discretion under the Migration Act, which could lead to the 9-time Aussie Open champ being banned from the country for 3 years. A spokesperson for Hawke said that he's currently considering the matter and will likely make a decision on Tuesday. Initially, I was extremely confused as to why Novak even won his appeal. I say this because first, there were numerous reports that Health Minister Greg Hunt warned Tennis Australia that border force would only accept fully vaccinated status. However, that isn't necessarily the case. Hunt also just told Tennis Australia CEO Craig Tiley to refer to the ATAGI guidelines, which state that a non-citizen could use a previous COVID infection as an exemption to enter the country, but they'd have to undergo a quarantine, which fully vaxxed players would not have to do. Djokovic was granted a temporary exemption visa back in November, but it didn't excuse unvaccinated non-citizens, which was why he was stopped by border force in the first place. Then the force questioned the validity of his exemption for whatever reason. A federal government source saying that a past COVID infection wasn't necessarily sufficient for entry, which is weird and makes absolutely no sense. It's clearly in the Australian health guidelines that once again, proof of previous COVID infection is acceptable for non-vaccinated non-citizens. They just have to quarantine. This makes me suspect that Djokovic's detainment was all a political move due to the backlash of him even being granted the exemption. Another player, Renata Vodakova, used the same excuse Novak did and was approved with little ease, but then was unfairly deported after already playing a tournament. That's just not fair, and she deserves her justice. I agree with the hearing decision because Djokovic should not have been detained, considering the fact that he had no information from the federal government prohibiting his type of exemption. It just seems to me that they're making stuff up out of thin air, because how can there be that much of a discrepancy between the federal and state government with their rulings? Now that we've established that Novak was poorly treated by border force and shouldn't have been subjected to those conditions, it's time to get into the bad stuff against the Serb. Novak's actual previous COVID infection is just very fishy itself. I mentioned previously that Djokovic's lawyers revealed he tested positive for COVID just last month on December 16th. The hearing revealed that those positive PCR test results were returned that same day, the 16th, meaning Djokovic still attended public events in Serbia the very next day, COVID positive and unmasked. When the press asked his brother about this today, he immediately ended the press conference, which is interesting to say the least. This is obviously irresponsible because Novak's putting others at risk of catching the virus. There's still suspicion that Djokovic and his team faked the positive result, but many say the scenario still might be better than what's presented in court. I still do believe that Novak tested positive because he attended a basketball game on the 14th, posing unmasked with player Nigel Hayes, who tested positive soon after. This late infection doesn't make Novak look good at all, besides what I've already said. It shows that Djokovic was solely relying on a positive COVID infection result instead of having intentions to get the shot, but just had a valid roadblock preventing him from doing so. We know that Australia is extremely strict about the pandemic with the extensive lockdowns and vaccine mandates. In this situation, an exemption shouldn't be granted for people merely skeptical of getting the vaccine like Novak is. This is why many Australians are so angry, because they feel like Nole's kind of sneakily using a loophole to get into the country, which he is, let's be honest. Also, a question still remains. Why did Tennis Australia and the other medical panel grant him access in the first place when he tested positive 6 days out of the December 10th exemption deadline? Craig Tiley came out and said that the applications were anonymous, which is now really hard to believe, saying that Novak tested positive so late. They clearly bent the rules to let him in. My other question is, what was Novak going to do if he never tested positive? I'm definitely buying into the possibility that he purposely got himself infected so that he have an exemption. Australians are understandably furious about this court decision, and while you can call Djokovic out for using the exemption loophole, people should direct most of their anger towards the government for even having these laws set in place. This could have all been avoided if they implemented a strict vaccine mandate for non-citizens that only allowed exceptions for players with extreme medical issues. Djokovic took advantage of their poorly enforced rules, and now that that both the federal and Victorian government saw all the backlash from the citizens, they backpedaled and tried to make Novak the enemy. The Aussie government also failed to consider the number of supporters Djokovic has. Even with the appeal being approved, his fans still acted a fool. The feds shouldn't have detained him in those conditions, but they also shouldn't be doing the same to asylum seekers currently staying in the Park Hotel. Hopefully this entire situation raises awareness and will ultimately grant them just treatment too. So after the court decision, Djokovic went to Rod Laver Arena for a late night hit, telling supporters, "I'm pleased and grateful that the judge overturned my visa cancellation. Despite all that has happened, I want to stay and try to compete at the Australian Open. I remain focused on that. I flew here to play at one of the most important events we have in front of amazing fans. For now, I cannot say more, but thank you all for standing with me through this and encouraging me to stay strong." I didn't expect to feel this way, but I'm honestly glad that Novak might play the Australian Open, even though he really shouldn't, because he saw his chance and took it. Don't hate the player, hate the game. I'm also happy because the fans are going to be... I can't wait. But still, Alex Hawke can re-detain him, so that's even more mess. But until he makes his decision, that's all I have for y'all. Let me know in the comments what you think about the trial results and if your feelings changed too after getting all the right information. Also, make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell so you're notified whenever I post about Hawke's decision. Thanks for watching, and I'll probably see you soon here on Grand Slam Tennis News Today.